And what's up? What's up? What's up, my people? My people? My people? What's going on? Welcome to another episode of Through a Culture Lens. I am your host, Michael Anthony, and of course, I'm here with the illustrious, the person with 20 straight days without a bad day, Miss Amber Gray. How you doing, girl?
Hello. I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's brick outside. It's cold.
It's beyond. Just sitting by my window is like, okay, let me move. This is actually not comfortable. It's cold today
I
and
know.
windy, which is makes it worse.
It's like the wind just cuts through you.
That's right.
Like you had to get you a jacket, like Cat Williams said in that one comedy. You have to get you a jacket from the area because you can't bring like you from California. You can't bring your California jacket to DC.
That's true.
And think you're
That's
gonna be able
true.
to make it.
Yeah,
But
you're gonna need a special jacket for today, for sure.
yes, for sure, for sure. Well, everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining us for another episode. Today we have a very exciting one. Um,
A
and
complicated one. Very excited, a little complicated.
very excited, very excited. But before we get into the weeds, we like to kind of talk about a little bit about what's going on in the industry. And there's a couple of things that me and Amber like to mention. So, Amber, would you like to go ahead and take this one?
Yeah, so we've talked about Lovecraft a few times on the show. So the showrunner of Lovecraft, Misha Green, she actually is going to be directing. It'll be her directorial debut. She'll be directing the next Tomb Raider. So that's good news. Like this is kind of what I wanted to see. I wanted to see a show like Lovecraft, a show like some of these kind of groundbreaking shows. I wanted to see what was going to happen to the people that were behind the scenes and in front of the camera. I wanted them to blow up. So I'm happy to see this. So in addition to that, she sold something to Netflix called Mother. So I think she wrote that, and she sold that to Netflix. She's producing 2 films as well, Cleopatra Jones. So that's going to be like a
Okay.
remake, right? And The
Mm-hmm.
Gilded Ones. So
Okay.
she's making a name for herself. I'm happy to see it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's awesome. I think representation. Just like we'll talk about Oscar So White campaign that came out so long ago.
Right.
But one of my biggest things was how people talk about representation on the screen. But now we're
Mm-hmm.
starting to get something behind the camera, and
Right.
getting more writers and more directors and more producers, because then I think that's where we start kind of crafting our own narrative.
That's
So I think
right.
this is awesome, for her,
I do
especially
too.
as young as she is and sort of
Exactly.
getting in her career. I think this is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely good news for all filmmakers. Like, I think, we should rejoice. If you're in a marginalized group, this is good news.
And with Tomb Raider, and the thing is though, because it's not a black character,
Mm-hmm.
like Tomb Raider is
Right.
a video game character of a
That's right.
Caucasian woman,
That's right.
so it's like almost like how Antoine Fuqua, and
Mm-hmm.
Antoine Fuqua, right?
Yeah.
Like how
Mm-hmm.
he sort of crossed over and he doesn't do black films, he does films,
Yeah,
with
that's
black
right.
actors and white actors in it, and it seems like that's where she started to go.
Exactly. And yeah, and I think that's great because we've talked about that before. It's like, what's considered a black film and why do we have this hard time kind of just doing a film for everybody? So if she does well with this and, similar to, you know, um, the Old Guard, that was an ensemble, that was a black,
Right.
director. So when you
Mm-hmm.
when you see films like that, even if you don't love them, but when you start
Mm-hmm.
to see those films with black women in
Mm-hmm.
general, any sort of group that isn't, the dominant group, it's good. It's
Mm-hmm.
good to see. It only pushes the medium forward.
Absolutely, and then of course for women, women definitely,
Yep,
that's been a big thing. Women getting more behind the scenes and stuff like that. So
that's right.
so she's covering both, as a minority and as a woman, to
That's
do
right.
that. And
Yep.
then of course the second piece is Soul. So we had our debate about this before, but the week of Christmas, Soul actually had, I think they said 1.66 billion minutes viewed
Wow,
during the
that's
week of Christmas.
wonderful. That's great.
It is the top ranked Pixar movie as far as streaming.
Hmm.
For to get top 10. Now the overall is Frozen. Frozen has like 14 billion minutes viewed.
Frozen is just a beast. That
It's a
movie.
beast. But of course, that had sort of its cachet once it in the theater. So this was
Hmm.
the first time Pixar was supposed to be a summer movie, but then they
Hmm.
released it for Christmas, and of course, quarantine kind of helped that. But once again, this shows sort of how like African American viewership really
Yeah.
pushes this, because you can just tell. I mean, I'm pretty sure other people watched it, but this is just another point of where we saw ourselves in something, and then we wanted to see it, and then we sort of pushed that content up to the top.
I think it was actually genius to wait until the holidays. For some reason, at first I was like, oh no. I think sometimes the holidays can be a little bit of a kiss of death, a little bit. But
Mm-hmm.
this, I think, was perfect timing for this movie, just
Mm-hmm.
because, again, we're still at home. Most of us are still kind of at least, partially working from home, maybe going to the office part of the time. But our kids are at home. Most of them are not in school. So this was like a great time to release this. And I think that's probably contributes to, the over billion streamed of that movie. But obviously it was a great movie too. But I think it was a good timing, definitely good
It
timing
was.
for it.
I mean, holidays is always the great time, even if there wasn't the holidays. I mean, even if it wasn't just streaming or COVID,
Yeah.
holidays have always been like really big for movies in the box office and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I think that with this coming out, and because this went up against Wonder Woman,
Yeah.
on this basically the same day, so it like wiped Wonder Woman out, and actually it beat out the last ditch of The Office, because The Office moved from Netflix over to Peacock, so people wanted to do
Yeah.
their binge watching of The Office before it left.
Right.
And so to have Soul beat the Great Office show and Wonder
Mm-hmm.
Woman, which is a DC comic book movie,
Yeah.
I thought was speaks highly of it.
That's great. Yeah. That's good
Definitely
news.
speaks highly of it. So, of
Mm-hmm.
course, enough of that. I know we want to go ahead and get to it. So, today's episode, we are talking about media literacy. And of course, before we get into that, thank you guys for watching. Please give us a thumbs up, and of course, as I always say, you are the third host of this show. So please give whatever commentary that you have. For
That's
this.
right.
But today we're talking about media literacy. So, what is media literacy?
Media literacy is a little complicated of a subject. Media literacy, just like on like a very basic level, it's critically thinking about media messages on a very basic level. So essentially, what encompasses media? Like, what is media, right? Media is films, television shows, newspaper articles, websites, blogs, songs, music videos, social media. Those videos that your grandma posts on Facebook, random videos, like all that is media. And so, media literacy essentially is something that especially is coming to the forefront in the last couple of weeks because of the storming of the Capitol, where you have a whole bunch of misinformation out there causing people to be swayed into various behaviors, various mindsets. So what media literacy does, it essentially makes the user, the end user, which would be us, the consumer of media, it is an educational platform to actually give you the tools to assess the media that you're consuming. So for instance, you want to think about a couple of things when you're thinking about media literacy. You want to think about who created the message, right? So if you're watching something, I'll just go ahead and give a shout out to Fox News. If you're watching something on Fox News, and this is the only source that you're getting your information from, you might want to do some more digging. You might want to do a little bit more research on whatever that topic is that you're getting from Fox News. So it's making sure that you're really clear about this, who's sending the message. It's there's a lot of creative techniques that are used to attract people is very, you can be manipulated pretty easily when it comes to different medias. So it's literally taking the emotions out of whatever that topic is and thinking critically about what you're listening to, what you're watching, what you're reading, doing an analysis of, okay, does this seem factual? If you're not sure, and even if you are sure, I would recommend you do a little bit more digging and actually look and see, let me do my own research from some reputable sites that have, a long history of providing unbiased information, because I think that's where a lot of the trouble we've been getting into the last 4 years, specifically. I mean, really, this is a longer issue, but the last couple of years has been in the forefront with this whole fake news thing that, our past president was kind of pushing on everybody. Oh, that's fake news. That's fake news. That's fake news. Well, not everything is fake, and some things are verifiable, and that's up to us, because the way that the web is, we can't really stop people from posting or creating whatever they want to create, right? But it's up to us to do the research and the due diligence to make sure that this information is factual and it's backed up and substantial, because there's dire effects if we don't. And this is what happened on January 6th. And it's, as you'll see deeper, it's what's happening with some of these stereotypes that we see of people, with some of these kind of ingrained messages that we've gotten about certain segments of the population. A lot of that stuff if we would have been taught properly what media literacy is, we probably could have, moved past some of these tropes and these ideas and stereotypes if we had been given that kind of proper presentation of that
No, and
information.
oh no, and I 100% agree. I think media literacy is as today as 2021 is probably just as important as financial literacy. I mean, financial
It
literacy is
is.
important, but the way that the media literacy is, as far as people understanding what is real and what isn't real, what is fake, what
Mm-hmm.
isn't fake,
Yep.
how things is it entertaining? Also a big thing is like what is news and what is opinion.
That's
And
right.
that's like a huge thing that's been going on, especially in the news cycles with your
That's
Fox
right.
News, as you mentioned, your
Mm-hmm.
MSNBCs, even CNNs. A
Yep.
lot of these networks are now based off of opinion as opposed to like, giving the news.
Exactly. That's right. And I think that's the news definitely is kind of driving a lot of this stuff. But again, you can find misinformation, biased opinions in textbooks that they're giving to, students in school. I mean, that's what a lot of us say, I didn't learn that in school, or that wasn't in my textbooks. That's because there's still a kind of a white supremacist skew in a lot of these textbooks, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
a lot of media that we consume has a biased opinion or skewed toward the status quo. So again, some of these things that we're kind of ingesting, I think that a lot of us have kind of like internalized some of these things,
Mm-hmm.
and that's we'll get into that discussion a little bit later. But it's such this is really kind of the one of the things I've been reading a whole lot about. This is like something they're really trying to push in K through 12 education right now, just to prevent this lack of critical thinking that
Mm-hmm.
is happening in adulthood. So this is something major that I don't think that a lot of us were taught unless you went to media media school, unless you went to some of these kind of like film programs where we do analyze a lot of things. If you're not, or in a sociological aspect, if you're not like in a sociological program, you're probably not going to know what this is or understand how to decipher from real unbiased biased information.
Mm-hmm. No, no, I 100% agree. I wonder, and this is starting to become something that they're thinking about actually putting into schools, because I think
They
you had
are.
you had mentioned
It's
something else.
already
I
been a
think.
lot. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think Colorado passed a bill not too long ago about making it kind of like a K through 12 necessity. But all 50 states kind of have something embedded in the K through 12, but because Congress hasn't put anything sweeping out there that everybody must teach this, that it's kind of up to the states and up to the local school districts to actually teach
Mm-hmm.
this. And then it's also like, curriculum based. I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
one teacher teaches something and it's not really a part of whatever curriculum that school district has, they just, have this like passion to talk about media literacy. You don't really know what information they're getting. So it's not regulated essentially. It's just kind of like, kind of up to the states, up to the school districts to teach kids how to decipher what they're getting on their phones, on their computers, on their TVs. It's just up, up to the individual school districts to do
And the thing
that.
is, though, it's a lot more dangerous now because of kids. Like I got a 13-year-old who has a phone,
That's
who
right.
watches
That's
YouTube.
right. Mm-hmm.
And having
Yep.
to sit there and talk to him about that. When we grew up, we had the old tube TVs, sitting on the
That's right.
ground. Your
Mm-hmm.
grandma would be like, turn that TV off because you're running up the heat, and
Right.
things like
Right.
that.
Right. Electricity bills out of control. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
The house is too hot.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so with media literacy, it's one of those things, like now especially it's more than ever. And now we're starting to see like Facebook starting to,
Yep.
be in front of Congress, and
Yep.
Twitter, now I think, just the other day they were talking about now they're having a bird watch sort
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah. Explain
Yeah, you heard
about
about
that.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Explain that.
Yeah, the bird watch is basically Twitter is asking the Twitter community to help
Mm-hmm.
censor people. So if there's disinformation out there, then you sort of flag that person or that post, and then it goes into this algorithm to where they can determine if it's misinformation, if it's disinformation, if it's volatile or anything like
Yeah.
that. So now they're starting to even think about this literacy because, yeah, you have people like you talked about the January 6th event where
Mm-hmm.
people were, because of what they saw on the news or what they got in their Facebook feeds, they
Mm-hmm.
really believed that this election was not factual. You
Right.
know.
Right. Based off of the words of who's supposed to be our trusted leader, right? Like the president is supposed to be the trusted leader
Mm-hmm.
of the United States, and he's telling his base,
Mm-hmm.
I've been robbed. This
Mm-hmm.
has been taken away from us. So when, especially when you kind of, let them come into the fold, when you're telling them
Right.
this is your election too. They stole it from you. That,
Right.
that incited obviously what we saw.
Right.
And
Right. And
again,
then
misinformation.
right? And then Claude Barnes is in the chat talking about what tools do we need to be able to separate sense from nonsense is really important in today's environment, and it really is.
Yeah.
But it's
Mm-hmm.
also a human thing, because then I guess people start talking about like that First Amendment right, which is
That's it.
really
Yep.
tricky, which it really
Right.
gets really tricky,
Mm-hmm.
and and like one of the things, of course, this is through a culture lens, so we cover a lot of things that are based around African American, is what we discussed last week, which is these media tropes that we
Right.
have in the literacy that has to go into that. So kind of explain a little bit to us about what this is all about.
Yeah, so we talked about this 2 episodes ago. I mean, most of us know the portrayal of black men in the media, right? We know the portrayal of black women. We know the portrayal of, Latinx, Hispanic people. We know all of that. Um, but what happens is, if when from the historical standpoint, if all the black men that people saw in the news, on their newspapers and television and on films, were these big black bucks who were, once again, raping, pillaging, had no uh, consciousness, basically animals. This particular trope has just kind of morphed, right? It's like that trope. The ones that I think have kind of morphed and kind of really kind of stayed are the black bucks, the coons, and the Jezebels.
Mm-hmm.
So those
Mm-hmm.
kind of encompass basically black people in general, and those have kind of followed us from the early 1900s to now. So the
Mm-hmm.
black buck slash coon has kind of morphed into this
That
thug,
caveat
right?
was
It's the
most
thug image that we see in these television shows. It's a thug image that we hear or we see, watching the Channel 7 News, the Channel 9 News. It's that particular image. It's hardly, we don't see the Uncle Tom much anymore, but we hardly see just kind of like a well-rounded black person on the news, a well-rounded, it's just not there. So when you have these tropes, they feed into the consciousness of the people who have been consuming, right? So if I've been watching Gone with the Wind and I watch, these shows, I'm going to think that literally either black people or black women are all sassy. They're all, I mean, they're in service, to me, the white consumer. And if you're watching something like, of course, like Birth of a Nation, or,
Mm-hmm.
and even the shows, even the movies and shows that we kind of took over, like the black exploitation films, those had a general theme. They kind of morphed into a little bit of that big black buck, but kind of like the hero big black buck, the black buck,
the other
kind of the
portion
hero
of this
coon. So they kind of turned those tropes into, center stage, and the hero aspect as opposed to the villain in some of those white earlier films. But those
Mm-hmm.
still tropes morphed into what people thought of us. People still
Mm-hmm.
thought that we were over sexualized, like in Foxy Brown, because of that
Mm-hmm.
character's portrayal. People thought that black men were literally just, just kicking butt, beating people up, raping people, because of some of these, black exploitation films that, again, a lot of them were produced by black people. So
Mm-hmm.
these tropes are following us. They get called different names, they get morphed, and they're causing us to view ourselves, in a negative light. But
Mm-hmm.
obviously, it's causing the media to kind of paint a broad or narrow stroke of who we are because of those earlier portrayals, because they're still around.
Person's home. I mean, come on.
Still around. I mean, and looking at these articles, that we have here, like this article right here was written in what year was this? 1993.
I think 1993. Yep,
Yeah,
1993.
1993. Talking, and matter of fact, I remember that movie. That was a Strapped. That was a movie with Bo Kim
I never saw that.
Woodbine, and yeah, it was an HBO movie about getting guns in New York. And it had
Right.
the guy from Onyx. I can't remember what his name is. And then we
Fredro
have
Starr.
I can't remember the
Okay.
I can't remember. I
Okay.
just remember he was from the group Onyx.
Okay.
I just remember that.
Probably
But I
Fredro
remember
Starr, because he was acting a lot around that time, so probably was.
Okay. It might have been him. And then and then this article right here, when the media misrepresents black men and it affects the real world, and this
Exactly.
was written 5 years ago.
Right.
And then just last year, I guess whatever polling that they're doing, USA Today, 2 out of 3 Black Americans don't see themselves represented in movies and TV. Study says, but if you read this article, it really kind of breaks down. It's like they don't see themselves as like they're living now. It's like this middle class, or
Right.
people that's not into crime, more
Right.
of like this thug mentality that we keep seeing, perpetuated on television.
Right. So in that 1993 article, somebody who's kind of been ostracized now, Bill Cosby, was just highly upset about that movie Strapped. And a lot of people were coming down Forrest Whitaker. That was, I think, his directorial debut, I believe, of that movie. People are coming down on him and coming down on like HBO for taking on another show, in their opinion, that was showing that kind of hood life, that you know, guns and drugs and that sort of thing. And they were like, listen, the population of Black people that are actually living this kind of life is small, but that's the population that keeps getting all the airplay. Like,
Yes.
majority of Black people go to work, come home, eat dinner, go to bed. Like, just a simple, there's nothing glorious about it, there's nothing nefarious about it, it's just a normal everyday life. But outside of the Cosby Show, which lifted, and a lot of people were speculating that a lot of these kind of underworld, kind of thug shows were kind of a backlash to the pristine, overly over the top Cosby, where it's like, yeah, okay, so not all of us are lawyers and doctors, fine, but you know, most of us do have a job, most of us do go to whatever job we go to every day. So I think there was a little bit of a backlash of people just feeling like that was just so unattainable and so unrealistic, even though obviously it was wildly popular. Most of us watched it and loved it, but it wasn't necessarily relatable because of just that kind of wealth that they portrayed in the show, which I still think it's needed though, right? Like, we still need to see Black opulence and Black wealth because it exists. Just the pendulum swung so far to the, you know, projects, what we're seeing now. Yeah.
I mean, this is acting Black. You know, this is
acting Black.
This is acting Black. You know, that, you know, living this sort of life, you know, of this thug mentality, you know, and like a lot of these people, you know, like this video right here is talking about like known rappers who have gang affiliation, and some of them weren't even gang affiliated until they became a rapper.
Wow.
You know, and
so they're what's that guy that went to jail and then snitched on everybody, who became a something? I can't remember his name, with the crazy hair. He was like a Hispanic dude. It's like he became whatever. He became whatever after he became. I'm like, okay, this is all of it. It's like a farce. It's a farce.
Correct. And these are the images that, you know, part of this trope that, you know, we kind of fall into. And the thing is, though, this is how people look at us. You know, this is not you know, something that we're I mean, you know, it was placed upon us. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like when we talked about the Black Buck, like you were talking about earlier, and Birth of a Nation and different things like that, and now how we're sort of perpetuating it. And really, rap music is sort of really igniting this whole thing. You know, TV is one thing. You know, you have your Powers, you have your Empires. You know, you have, you know, movies like, you know, you Miss Society, Boys in the Hood. And once again, I listen to hip hop. You know what I'm saying? I will not discount that. You know, I like, you know, New Jack City and movies like that. But the thing is, though, I know that it's fake, you know, or it's not necessarily fake, but I know that I'm just looking at it as entertainment. I'm looking at it as like the Avengers.
Yeah, it doesn't, and this is why it's really important to get the youth component of this particular conversation involved, because that's who I'm talking about. 6ix9ine. That's what I was talking about. Yeah, it's really important that this is like a youth conversation, right? Because even though, as we see, adults every single day fall victim to believing things that are completely inaccurate and not real at all. But if we're going to get kids, you know, to have that critical thinking that we need them to have into adulthood, it's really important that we say, like that conversation you had with your son, it's like, let's listen to these songs. Let's listen to these songs that Lil Wayne is putting out, that whoever's putting out, and let's kind of dissect them. And let's look at who these people actually are, right? Like, who are these people in real life? Because if you don't have somebody sitting you down at 12, you know, even before that, let's say like, you know, 8, 9, 10 years old, saying your favorite rapper, your favorite R&B, or whoever it is, your favorite actor, he goes home in his Porsche with his gated community, with his security guard. He is not out there. He is not out there doing what he's talking about in these songs. And I need you to not think that that you need to emulate something for some sort of cool points, for some sort of clout. And that's like where, you know, this conversation is like crucial, you know, specifically to our young Black males. It's like, we need to tell them this ain't it. This is literally not reality, what they're presenting to. Now, of course, the last couple weeks, there's been a lot of rappers that have been killed. Now, I don't know the you know, what exactly prompted some of these, you know, beefs, or if there was some sort of gang affiliation. I don't know. And I don't know if it was, you know, I really don't. But I just know that majority of them, Drake is from Toronto. Okay, like these majority of these people, I mean, half amigos, you know, two-parent household worked like it's not, it's a whole made up manufactured image that people need to realize, you know, before they start thinking they need to be like these people.
Right. Rick Ross was a correction officer,
Hello.
and he actually got his name from somebody who we're going to mention later.
Mm-hmm.
Rick Ross, so for him, I mean, once again, he got bars every once in a while, but he is
Mm-hmm.
definitely not living that life. I mean, even Tupac
That's right.
admitted that Tupac went to art school, and I love Tupac. I'm a
Exactly.
Tupac. Like
Love
that's my man
Tupac too.
right there. But
Mm-hmm.
he said that he was a street poet, and what he was doing is he was bringing what was happening on the streets to the people.
Right.
And of course, we got some people in the chat. Phil says research and education. I guess that's the only way that we're
That's
going to
right.
combat,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
this. And then of course Lisa says, acting
That's my
black.
auntie. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, hey auntie,
Mm-hmm.
hi auntie. And then Superfly, which and Claude talks about Superfly. Talking
Mm-hmm.
about that black exploitation.
Right.
Of during that time in the 70s, and of course my OGs in here can correct me or not, but during the
Mm-hmm.
70s with Sweet Badass Song, he was what, a gigolo.
Mm-hmm.
Superfly
Mm-hmm.
was a cocaine dealer.
Mm-hmm.
Goldie and the Mac was a pimp.
Mm-hmm.
Dolomite was a pimp.
Mm-hmm.
Even Black Caesar, it was like, even though we had some of the black superheroes there, like your Shafts,
Right.
and there were some other ones that was out there, but really the ones that I remember seeing when I was growing up was the ghetto,
Yep.
folks that was,
Underworld. All
the
underworld
underworld.
stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Which then of course brings us to, like this manufactured criminality,
Yeah.
that we have right now.
Right.
As far as how that came about, and this
Exactly.
article right here, if I'm not mistaken, this one, which is in our show notes, this is about the CIA Contra situation that happened in the
Mm-hmm.
80s, and of course I know my OGs probably know a little bit about that, but go ahead and tell us a little bit about this one.
Well, I wasn't really going to talk much about this, but I will just
Okay.
say,
Okay.
yeah, from just kind of a general standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
there's been probably like kind of word of mouth since the 80s about where did crack come from? Like, why all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden are we infiltrated with this drug? Why all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden are, our neighborhoods dilapidated? We got trap houses everywhere. Like, how did we get affected so so
Mm-hmm.
badly by this? And so when you do your research, you'll see that there is some government ties, to
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the drug industry.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, if you really think about it, how are some of these local drug dealers connected to Nicaragua? How are they connected to Colombia and all these places?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's got to be some resource, some known resource that is allowing this amount of product to get into the United States to be distributed.
Mm-hmm.
So, and once the show notes do talk about that, you can read about that. And there's a great movie, which we'll talk about. Well, we can bring that up now if you want. What is the
Mm-hmm.
name of the movie again? That we,
Kill the Messenger or
about the,
Crack?
yeah, Kill the Messenger. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Mm-hmm.
Kill the
Mm-hmm.
Messenger is a really great movie that kind of really highlights the government's involvement in bringing drugs to Los Angeles specifically. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, Los Angeles kind of like a hub, and then it kind of just spread to all the major cities: Chicago, New
Very
York,
well.
Miami.
San Jose Mercury News.
But yeah, it kind of talks about how this wasn't like, some accident. This
Mm-hmm.
wasn't some, we had some connection because Black people are just nefarious and we just have all this like drug connections to sell. No, there was like an actual kind of reason why it affected our neighborhood so badly. And then it caused, again, more media tropes, because this time, so you've got, the drug kind of infiltration of our neighborhoods, destroying our families, in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And then that became what? Crackhead. That was one of the new tropes. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if on the news, you could literally see people. I was watching old news clips. There's literally people like passed out on a New York street with a crack pipe in their hand. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
woman who's talking to a reporter as she's smoking crack, saying, he's asking her questions. You have children? Yes, I do. But I don't raise him. He's with my mom. So you've got, they're interviewing these people obviously to
Mm-hmm.
exploit this whole epidemic, right? So it's like they're interviewing this woman. She's telling you, I do not raise my children. So then it becomes the crack baby, right? The
Mm-hmm.
crackhead, the crack baby. Black women are completely irresponsible. They're, tearing up the Black family. They're tearing up households because when you take out the woman, you take out the nucleus. That was
Mm-hmm.
like, one thing that I was reading about. It's like that particular epidemic specifically hurt Black women the most because they were
Mm-hmm.
doing anything to
Mm-hmm.
get this particular drug. That
Mm-hmm.
meant leaving their children
celebration,
behind. That
and
meant
culture
selling their
was part
bodies.
of
That
that.
meant
Part
selling,
of that.
their kids' toys, like you name it.
Mm-hmm.
So this was like a really huge problem, and the media really overdid it. I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying it wasn't a huge problem, but the way the media, and of course, this is during the Reagan administration,
Mm-hmm.
that just say no and all that stuff with the irony because Reagan was involved in some of this Contra stuff, which brought the
Mm-hmm.
drugs here. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what makes it so ironic is that, they've got this whole campaign about say no when those particular neighborhoods that they're really focusing this campaign on really don't have a choice. Like there's videos of kids that are walking down the street and they're like, we don't even like going outside because we got
Right.
to see, these people that are passed out or dead. And then
Mm-hmm.
now, because of the amount of money that's flowing through our neighborhoods because of drugs, people are getting killed left and right because of gun
Mm-hmm.
violence now. So these neighborhoods and these families were torn apart, which again the media really sensationalized and really just blew up in the 80s and 90s, and it really put a face to again how the Black family is a failure and how Black people are just awful. Just to be blunt.
It just and like this right now showing the trailer for the Netflix documentary Crack, done
Right.
by the great director Stanley Nelson.
Great
And
documentary.
it's it really kind of goes into just like Kill the Messenger about sort of this this system wide infiltration of the Black neighborhood in order to really fund government kind of ops,
Right.
government funded kind of wars and different things like that, and
Right.
how they put us, but then they perpetuated us out there, as African Americans of being, like you said, this downright, ugly, I remember, back in the 80s, you would consistently see Black people being handcuffed and thrown in the paddy wagon, going to
Right.
jail.
Right.
And it was like, nobody wants to be a crackhead, nobody wants to
Mm-hmm.
be, nobody wants to have a crack baby. But it was just
Right.
like this thug mentality to where that's whenever all of a sudden people started clutching their purses and locking their
Mm-hmm.
doors because
Mm-hmm.
that same brute that we saw back in the early 1900s, now all of a sudden it's in their 70s and 80s, and now
Yep.
he's like trying to rob you to get some crack rock, like
Right.
Pookie on New Jack City.
Exactly. Yeah, and then just to go a step further, so yeah, it perpetuated that big black buck, that coon mentality in the Black male perspective, because that was who was predominantly selling it, right? So they were seen as the pushing this into the neighborhoods. They're pushing it into, they give it to their mama. Their mama asked for it. I mean, they just have no moral compass. These are terrible, horrible people who are pushing this drug, and our government is trying so hard to save the Black people with this "don't say no" propaganda.
Yes, 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 yes.
So you've got that, and then you've got another layer of again the Black women who are hooked on this,
Mm-hmm.
who are dealing with other traumas. In the movie Crack, there was a woman whose 5-year-old son was killed.
Mm-hmm.
She was educated woman, had a job, all these things, had her own place, but that hurt turned into drug abuse.
Right.
That turned into her just kind of spiraling. And so, you know, her case, and then another case of a woman literally, going for like her 6 or 7 month checkup of being pregnant. She tells the nurse in South Carolina, I need help. I'm addicted to this. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm pregnant. Obviously, I've got another child at home. And what did the nurse do? Called the police on her, stuck her in jail instead of helping her with the drug treatment program. And this is what happened time and time again. They're
Mm-hmm.
asking for help. Black people are asking for help. It's like all these cries, you can obviously see people are like crying out, asking for jobs. Because I mean, why would our community be hit so hard? If we had jobs, then this
Since the
probably
dawn
wouldn't
of
have been such a
American
huge
cinema,
blow
with
to
film
our community. But there wasn't jobs like that. You can go to McDonald's, get $3, 35 cents an hour minimum wage job, but that's not going to feed a family. So what do you have to do? Supplement, do things that you don't want to do because you're pushed to the fringes because of redlining. You're pushed to the fringes because of people don't want to, invest in your neighborhoods. So you have to do things that you wouldn't normally do. And then you've got women who are just trying to cope, using drugs, asking for help, being put in jail and criminalized. And this was on the news every day, being criminalized for an addiction, which we'll get into because obviously other people, and this is one thing, 2/3 of crack users during the time were white. 2/3.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody know. I mean, the face was not them, right? It was us.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason was a lot of times there's a difference between the inner city drug use and say a suburban drug use, because the inner city drug use, a lot of times, they're going to be probably out in the open. There's going to be a little bit more kind of outward showing of
Right.
the addiction, whereas a
Mm-hmm.
suburban addict is just doing it in their bathroom. They're doing it at home. They're maintaining some sort of quote unquote normalcy while
Mm-hmm.
they're addicted to these
Black
drugs.
celebrities
So the
receiving
face
the
was
most.
easy to pin on us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I mean, and the thing is though, is it my understanding that crack comes from cocaine, right?
It does. Yeah, it's like a cut down version, right? It's like cut with baking soda. It's cut down and
Mm-hmm.
cheaper.
And
It's
cooked
like
and all this other stuff.
and,
Not that we
yeah,
know the recipe. We don't know the recipe.
we don't know.
It's just it's rap music. Rap music taught us.
Right,
You know?
right. I'm in love with the cocoa taught me. Okay.
Right, right.
OT
But,
Genesis.
but then they've always talked about like this somehow, like you said, the suburban drug would always get the slap on the wrist,
Right.
and it was the cocaine, but
Right.
the same amount of cocaine, would get you a slap on the wrist, where the same amount of crack would get you minimum 5 years in prison.
That's
know?
right.
And yeah, and then and of course, sort of fast forward in that right now, that brings us to sort of like this whole thing of like how we need to look at sort of this opioid versus crack epidemic, because right now opioid
Yes.
is like they've called it a national security issue, or like a health crisis.
Public
That's
health,
what
a public health
Yeah.
crisis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Go
So I
ahead.
mean, I think most of us have seen images within the last. I mean, I haven't seen them recently. I'd say within the last like 5 to 6 years, maybe even a decade,
Mm-hmm.
of white families passed out in their cars because they
Mm-hmm.
just either did meth or some sort of opioid, and they've got their two kids in the back seat and car seats, just looking confused, like what's up with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as this became an issue, like in West Virginia, some of the Midwest areas became like really just a hotbed of opioid addiction, and it
Mm-hmm.
became this national conversation. We need to get them help. We need to help
Mm-hmm.
these people. We need to get them
Mm-hmm.
into drug treatment programs. These poor families are being torn apart. That was not what was said during the crack and even heroin epidemic for Black people. We were not
Right.
given help. There was a media image of what a crackhead was, and it was somebody who was an undesirable, who could not be helped, and who could be thrown away into the trash because they were a useless person. This is not the same media portrayal that we're getting with the white drug user.
Mm-hmm. Not at all. Not at all. I mean,
Not at all.
I mean, especially now, and the thing is, the opioids are legal. I mean, you can get them.
That's right.
You just tell somebody you got a headache or something, and
Yep.
all of a sudden, you get a prescription, and because I mean, I remember kids was crushing up Ritalin. Back when I was in high
remember.
school.
Yeah.
Crushing up Ritalin and storing that, and what Ritalin is for ADD, right?
ADHD, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
and I remember I had a very minor surgery. They gave, and this was probably the time they were like over giving people prescription of like Percocets and Vicodins and stuff like that. But I've never been a major, I don't even really take Advil. Like if I have a headache, I just go to sleep. Like I'm just not really a pill user. But I remember they gave me so much Percocet, and I had taken one. I'm like, I don't like the way I feel. I'm not going to take this again. And I remember some white friends came over. One was a male, one was a female. And the white male saw that vial and said, how much? And I didn't even realize, I mean, I'm naive. I'm like, for what? He's like, how much are you going to, how much could I get for the Percocet? I'm like, you can have one. But in my mind, I still wasn't thinking this is like some sort of actual addictive substance, because I had never been prescribed that. I had no idea. So it's one of those things where it's like I had no idea, but they knew. They've been knowing. I had no clue. As a non-drug user, I had no idea that this was something that people partaked in and could get this addicted to. But I think a lot of the reason why they're so slap on the wrist with it is because, I mean, we've heard, a lot of these like political commentators, some of these, even these politicians have had drug issues, have had opioid issues. So it's like this sensitivity to it because it's something that they can relate to, I guess. It's like something that's just like so white, like a white collar drug, like, cocaine was made to be.
Mm-hmm. Almost like that movie Traffic. I don't know if you remember that with Michael Douglas.
I
He
do,
was the
yeah.
judge, remember? And then like he was supposed to be hard on drugs, but then all
Yeah.
of a sudden his daughter was going to the ghetto and getting her heroin and sleeping
Yeah,
with the drug
yeah.
dealer and stuff like
That's
that. And, like
right.
how that sort of opened up his eyes, but then it was like, oh, we need to
Right.
get these people help. But then even still then, there's still, there's still this bias still.
That's right.
Because
That's
like you
right.
said, like they will definitely show so more support, like just like that video, that footage I was just showing of them helping this girl who's about to OD. They're about to give her administer some drugs and things like that. But then you watch that crack movie, you wasn't seeing that. They was busting down doors. I mean, they was bringing tanks to people's houses, and
That's
so
right.
just the whole decriminalization, just the criminalization of that is just, kind of sad. I hate that.
I mean, again, that just ties, just to reconfirm that we're getting the ties here. It's like that just ties into if the media has a story to tell about your community, and that story is a negative one, they're going to tell it in a way where it's easily digestible for the masses, and when the masses are watching Black people passed out or dead with a crack pipe in their hand, or a Black mother gave birth to a 1-pound crack baby, they're pushing that to kind of paint this narrative of like, nothing we can do for these people is going to get them on the straight and narrow. They're just helpless people. So this is the narrative. This is why there's not a lot of sympathy with the Black Lives Matter movement, not a lot of sympathy when things happen to us, which is why people can continuously watch these videos of Black people being killed and literally feel nothing, because there's just no sympathy. Yeah, the media has literally desensitized our suffering. People do not care about it. People think we brought it upon ourselves. And this is, again, why the media literacy is such an important tool to give young kids and adults, because once you strip down and see most drug users were actually not Black, they were white. Once you figure that out, that whole crackhead narrative and that whole crack baby narrative kind of gets thrown out the window. You kind of realize, okay, so this was something they were pushing to create a story, to create this kind of like criminalization of this whole entire group. Once you kind of, dig a little deeper and get a little critical with the media you're consuming, you'll see that a lot of these, these ideas that we have about ourselves even, and people have about us, were manufactured.
We're completely manufactured. I mean, it's like how, like you said, like the Black Lives Matter, like, oh, well, maybe he deserved it, just like maybe doing these acts, on the steps, showing the George Floyd, like he got killed over $20, not because he was selling crack rock, even Eric Gardner, he was selling cigarettes, he was selling cigarettes, not drugs, but they choked him up. But then, you have these Caucasian people who are selling these drugs and things like that, and then they getting rehabilitation. And like, of course we have these things in the show notes, but there's stats out there where, caseworkers will literally show a Black person like, okay, just stay off of drugs, give them a drug test consistently, always checking up on their drug test. And, of course they're marginalized. They can't get jobs. They're getting put off of support, so the only thing they can do is be forced back into the system, to where they can get their second, third strike. But then the white counterpart, then what they do is then they go into the rehab clinic, get great referrals, and, get clean, go see a psychiatrist. And then next thing you know, they can, probably get their voting rights back, even if they're a felon, even if they even get to that point of felony.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm trying to think of if there's any Black celebrities that have had a drug problem that have been able to successfully continue their career, like a Robert Downey Jr. Yes. Robert Downey Jr. was getting arrested left and right for like a smooth decade. This man is Iron Man. And I cannot think of a Black counterpart who had a drug issue, who was able to continue and successfully become, you have to be clean cut. You got to be Will Smith. You got to be this clean cut Black person to continue your career if it's in media. But if you're white and you've had a couple drug incidents and a couple this and that, okay, we'll slap at risk, go to prison for maybe even, probably not, go to house arrest, something like that. Still have your career, but that's not really the case for us.
Right.
Yeah, Charlie Sheen, exactly. Charlie Sheen it's like the bottom. He just keeps going to the bottom of the ocean, and the guy probably will get a show next year, honestly.
Yeah. Absolutely. What was his whole thing? He was winning, right? Wasn't he?
Yeah,
winning?
With Tiger Blood. Yep, Tiger Blood winning.
Right. Oh, we got some folks in the chat. You want to read a couple of those off before we move on to sort of our next thing?
That's right. Yeah. So Lisa's bringing up Robitussin, and that was a huge thing. And I think they actually stopped. That's another thing. This is actually pretty crazy. So when I had another little, to make it seem like I had all these surgeries. I literally had one surgery, but I had a little strep throat incident, and they gave me the codeine. They gave me codeine.
Yes. Okay.
No, isn't that what they use for the syrup and all the stuff that they get hooked to? And I think they stopped producing it. I don't think they even manufacture codeine anymore because of or whatever
I
was
think.
available, easily available for the people that had that addiction.
Right. I remember Brett Favre, the football player. You know,
Mm,
he was on codeine and he was alcoholic while playing.
wow.
You know, but they
Wow.
just gave him rehab. But then Vince Young, he goes crazy one time and they kick him out the NFL.
Oh yeah, Samuel Jackson. He did have. Now was that?
Oh,
But that was
he had a big crack
before.
issue. He had a
Was
big
that
crack
before
issue.
he blew up though? So it wasn't like
It
this was
was.
like in the yeah. So he was dealing with that probably what in his early career and kind of got himself together. I'm thinking, but you're right. He definitely had a crack issue. He did.
Lisa says it's called robo tripping.
Robo tripping
I
because
remember.
a lot of time when you go to the drugstore to get like
Yeah,
Claritin D, they
yeah.
like let me write you down, gotta put you on a registry to make sure you're not making meth and all kinds of other stuff.
Right. Right. And you know what? And that's a great point because, they did start putting those drugs behind because white people were stealing those drugs to make meth. But the funny thing is that you know what else they locked up? Black hair
What's
care
that?
products. Remember,
Oh yeah, they do
remember when they
that. They do
locked
that.
up
They
hair care
still
products?
no. Remember, the Walmart
Oh,
down
they
the
still
street
do.
has it locked up. I gotta push a button to get my shea butter every time I go
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
Walmart.
You
Yeah,
gotta ask for the key, right?
I gotta ask for the key. Yeah, and they
Yeah.
actually just removed the. I think maybe there's a big stink because they just removed the case in one section, maybe like 2 months ago. Not even two
Right.
months ago. But I know that
Right.
like formula and all that stuff was behind the counter. You couldn't even get to formula in some of those
Right.
stores.
Well, I see
So
Diamond in here says something about don't remember who it was, but someone mentioned that the racism toward black people in the medical industry denying us meds we need actually protected us against the opioid crisis backfired.
oh,
Hmm.
that's a good point too. That's a good
Mm-hmm.
point too. Yep. Oh, my
Mm-hmm.
mom, Gary Dordan. Yeah, he did. I think he got fired off of CSI because of his
Oh.
drug addiction. But yeah, that's right, Diamond. I think that's exactly. Well, I mean, obviously, it's backfiring, like she said, because we experience pain for some reason they think we don't.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why you have all these deaths with black women and stuff like that. And then of course, COVID, right? COVID, there that black doctor who documented her
I was just
last
about to bring that up.
days,
Yes. Yes.
because they weren't giving her any pain medication, and that virus had attacked her entire chest cavity. I mean, she was in so much pain, and of course, they weren't giving her any help in that way because to them it was like get over it, but not
You know,
to another demographic.
right. And and just and of course we're gonna move on to because we definitely have some other topics we want to hit, and we
Yeah,
don't want to stay on here but
right.
too long. But it's just this whole drug and crack thing, and just the perception. And once again, this is all tying into media literacy. So
Mm-hmm.
then how people are viewing African Americans that are crackheads as opposed to somebody who's on opioids. You don't call them a crackhead. You
Right,
call them somebody who's struggling with a
right,
problem. And
right.
so not only are we seeing it perpetuated on television, but then is infiltrating us in our real lives right
Yeah,
now.
and that was a great
And
point
that's
to
when we
bring up
get
the medical. Yeah, the medical field. That's like a real world case of how our lives are being impacted by the media's portrayal of who we are as people and our addictions and our
mm-hmm,
abilities to withstand pain and all that stuff. So that's a great
mm-hmm.
point.
Hold on, Candace says somebody had a problem and they killed him off the show. Who was
Oh,
that?
that was Gary Dordan from CSI,
See, I
the
didn't watch
only
that show.
black. Yeah, yeah,
The guy he had the goatee
that's right.
and stuff,
In the
and like
Janet
kind of
Jackson
tall
video.
dude.
Janet Jackson video.
Yeah.
Yep. Hmm.
Real. Hold on,
Yeah.
what was his drug of choice?
I don't remember, Mom. Do you remember? Was it cocaine? I don't remember. I don't remember what
Oh,
his was,
I
but
remember
he
Columbus
was.
Short. I remember Columbus Short. He got put off of
I thought
Scandal.
it. Oh, was it cocaine?
It was cocaine. Now Columbus Short, his was cocaine. Now, of course, I think he also had some domestic violence issues
He
as
did. I
well.
think that was probably what. Yeah.
What did
Yeah.
it? But I remember like whenever they was letting him go, the big thing that came out about Columbus Short that basically ruined his career is that he was a cokehead.
Yeah.
I do remember that coming out when all that happened though.
That's right. Like my mom is right. It's like they killed them off the show. They dismiss black people and our medical issues. I mean, they do that. I mean, to this day, it's like every week I feel like there's an article about this mother. She was a doctor because that there's a doctor who's pregnant, gave birth last month and died like shortly
Mm,
after.
mm,
Somebody
mm.
who probably is like knows how to speak up for their rights because they're a doctor,
Right,
but still,
right.
it's like we're not
No
immune
choice.
to this. We're not immune
No,
to it.
no choice. No choice.
Yeah.
And then of course the other narrative that we have
The other
is, of course,
narrative.
the other narrative of the
Yeah.
media literacy has to go to these white rioters and black protesters. Just give us a taste of what this is about, girl. Just give us.
So I think we all kind of know where this is going, right? I mean, all 2020 we saw Black Lives Matter. I mean, we had several cases of
Mm-hmm.
protests throughout the country, throughout the world. It wasn't just our country, right? We had UK with all these people kind of joining in. We're just seeing the hypocrisy and seeing the, the slaughtering of Black people on camera with
Mm-hmm.
impunity, right? And with like
Mm-hmm.
Funny how the
no
media
justification
covers
for
both.
it, and then getting slaps on the wrist. So it really caused a stir. Majority of these protests, the Black Lives Matter protests, were relatively peaceful. I think most people said that it was really the militarization of law enforcement that was coming and kind of, egging things on and stirring things up, throwing, rubber bullets
Mm-hmm.
and gas bomb, all these things, kind of throwing them
Mm-hmm.
at the pepper spray and all that stuff. So it kind of exacerbated a crowd that was coming out there for an emotional issue, which kind of caused, I would say like a little bit heightened protest that probably wouldn't have happened. But the majority of those protests, like I said, I don't know if there's any casualties. I can't remember if there was any casualties
Mm.
in any of these protests. Could you recall any?
I feel like there was definitely mass arrests. There were
There's definitely mass arrests. Yeah.
And you know what the thing is, I can't really pinpoint of like if somebody died, but the thing is though, is that also part of the media literacy? Maybe that's something we probably need to do a follow up on, because
Yeah.
when this Capitol riot happened, we knew the moment every person died. Like when that white girl, when the Air Force officer, when she
Yeah.
got shot, we knew immediately. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
That she was dead, and we knew that the 5 people were there, which they keep bringing up. But I'm pretty sure that there's probably your boy in Minnesota, Kyle Ritten, what's his name?
Oh, Kyle Rittenhouse.
Rittenhouse. Yes, he shot people, and he was a bystander, so he shot like what 3 people.
He shot 3 people and is a white supremacist hero because of that.
Out on bail.
Right. So out on bail. So just to go back, I think most people know, even starting, not even just with this last year, but like the LA riots, right? All the riots that we've had throughout the history, what's the focus normally? It's not on the actual reason that we're out there rioting. It's not because Rodney King was beat up. It's not because of some verdict of a case. It's not because of, the many deaths that we saw televised, last year. It's because, kind of lost my train of thought. No, yeah. So what happens is I lost my train of thought. So essentially, what happens is it gets skewed to the looting, right? So the riot, the protest of why we're there. We're there because this particular person, was selling cigarettes and was choked out and died. We're there because this particular person was a special needs person and told you that, but you decided to shoot him anyway. That's why we're protesting. But the narrative in the media gets turned into they're rioting Walmart. They're rioting and looting Target. They're looting this store and that store. And that goes on a loop on some of these networks. Look at the looting, look at the looting, look at the looting. They don't talk about this kid in Colorado who was walking home and whose special needs was killed, and told them, I don't know what you're saying, I'm special needs, was killed, and everybody that killed him is just, reassigned to different precincts. That's why people are out here. But for some reason, they focus on the rage, the justifiable rage, which usually does not end in anybody actually getting killed unless you're going to kill somebody, which is what Kyle Rittenhouse was, his whole purpose was to go kill people. They focus on the destruction. But when it comes to the flip side, right? The flip side, the Capitol rioters, we already, and I mean, let's just start with the fact that there was tanks at Black Lives Matter protests. They were deployed. I mean, they had, all these military people ready before they even got there. Barricades, everything. They were ready. Now, it was widely known that what happened on the 6th of January was going to happen. It was openly talked about on, social media, openly talked about that they were going to go storm the Capitol and do all of this. Nobody took it seriously. And on top of that, there's a narrative of these Black Lives Matter people. It doesn't even matter if they're Black. Just if you're a sympathizer and you're there, you are a problem. You are a violent person. You are going against the status quo. So we will basically, neutralize you by pepper spraying you, doing what we can to get you out of here, essentially. But when it came to the Capitol, we've talked about the Capitol rioters because it's just something to really, really think about. It's like they come, they're helping up the women at the Capitol. Shouldn't be there. It's a federal offense to be there. They shouldn't have been there. Literally, the Black Lives Matter people were breaking no law. There's no law broken to assemble and protest peacefully. There's no law. But for them to come to the Capitol when they did, It's a federal offense. They're helping people into the building. They're
Mm-hmm.
holding women's hands. Oh, you need help
Mm-hmm.
up the steps? Okay, come on. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Phil says that actually, I guess he's referring to the Black Lives Matter protest that there was 25 total deaths and 14,000 arrests.
wow.
That is crazy.
Wow.
That is crazy. And
Wow.
yeah, man. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's eye opening because what we just was talking about. With matter of fact, let me go ahead and pull up that article. Let me go ahead and stop.
Okay.
No, let me stop this. Let me stop this. Let me go ahead and pull up this article for y'all. That Amber had showed us. Giving. Oop, nope, wrong one.
But just get that image.
This right
Just
here.
absorb that image.
Yes, this right
Yep.
here. The DOJ reportedly considering not charging all Capitol rioters, sparking an outrage. Chat, tell
You
me
get
what you
that,
feel about
guys?
it. Yeah, I mean,
How
when
do
you
you
read
guys
that,
feel
how did you
about
feel?
that?
Yeah.
I mean, these people were going to sell a laptop to an enemy, to Russia.
To Russia. And you said the girl's on house arrest, right?
She's on house arrest.
Mm, mm.
Meanwhile, didn't you send me an article, which I didn't get a chance to read, about the one lone black guy on January 6th is in jail still?
Mm-hmm. 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 Well,
I'm
Stan.
gonna do the Oprah meme, when she's like this. It's like, you can't write this stuff. This is, I mean, come on, guys.
You cannot. You cannot. Yeah, and of course, Lisa talks about what your boy said. Stand
Mm-hmm.
by, stand back, and stand by.
That's right. That's
Who else
right.
said something? I see the chat is on point tonight.
I know
There's
that's
several
25
deaths.
deaths and 14,000 arrests.
That's real. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, I think Miss Candace, right? That's interesting how the
Her
government
mom.
can
Mm-hmm.
shut down these races, but put other efforts into shutting down the Black Panthers. Mm-hmm. She watched
Hello.
last episode. She watched last
Hello.
episode.
Exactly. That's exactly
Mm-hmm.
right. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, one can hope, since Biden talked about this being, in a state of emergency type thing, like we're going to be
Yep.
tackling these extremist right-wing groups. We're going to be making sure, this and that. This is all I can do is like this, right? When it comes to the
Yes.
politicians, when it comes to kind of what they're going to do to help curb these extremists on the right, it's just like, listen, because they've
Yep.
been doing this for centuries. I mean, this is
Mm-hmm.
old. This is not new. And that's why people are like, Trump really emboldened them. And I'm like, these people have been alive forever. This is just the descendants of the Confederacy. These are like the same people. There's nothing different here. This is just a new age version of what we keep saying. This is not new.
Not new at all. Not new at all. I mean, and I think that's the whole thing of like the power of the media, and that's why
That's
once
right.
again talking about media literacy, like
Yep.
how media has framed these tropes and these caricatures to where and me and you talk about this all the time, Amber, about is life imitating art or is art imitating life?
That's right.
And it's almost too effective, like what where are we at in this conversation, and and some of us are even perpetuating some
That's
of these
right.
stereotypes that's out there, which is pretty damaging,
That's right.
and for us to live there. What's the chat saying right now? What's the chat talking about?
Yeah, Tristan saying, I'm like, why would they charge them? He's like, unfortunately, they live a life of delusions, and that's true. I mean, and that's why, there's a Time article that we put in the show notes. I really encourage you all to read that, about this huge push for, like, media literacy, cyber literacy. There's all these different names for it, but it's the same bottom line. It's these people came to the Capitol under false pretenses, and they keep regurgitating to, kind of inciting each other, getting each other riled up about stuff that isn't happening. It's not in reality. It's not factual, and it's just people need to understand. And like Tristan said, it's like they live in a delusional place that I think that it's going to be hard to really break a lot of these people out of it. It's like, a community type, ideology at this point,
Yeah. And just like Phil said, part of the problem is that we have plenty of organizations fighting for equality, but we don't join, we don't go together like we did 50 years ago, which which is a thing, that
Great
I think
point.
when you talked about, it's like, 50, 60, definitely in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, that's whenever it was like the Black community, that's when it was the strongest, that's when it was, the biggest. But then, as we talked about last week, and, sort of this week about, this crack and, the infiltration of the government going into, the Black community and really manufacturing this crack epidemic. Well, they manufactured the crack epidemic, but then also this thug mentality that then we
Right.
sort of fell into, to where it just sort of, they knew exactly what to do to sort of make sure that we didn't stay that long, which of course goes to segregation, which
That's right.
is another conversation that we will definitely get to. We don't have enough time, but just keep that on your mind, folks in the chat. Keep that on your mind. Was
Yeah.
segregation something that really we needed at the time?
Yeah, because we talked, and like I said, we don't want to go too long, but we
But
talked about
yeah.
this because one of the things that I've heard my mother say, I've heard my dad say, I've heard my grandparents say, aunties,
Mm-hmm.
uncles, about how there was so much unity in the '60s, how there were
Mm-hmm.
so many strong Black families in the
Mm-hmm.
'50s and '60s,
Mm-hmm.
with two-parent households, all of these
Mm-hmm.
things that they kind of now on the flip side say that we are just the complete opposite of, and we're just in
Mm-hmm.
disarray now.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes me wonder. It's like, how do we get from there to here? And again, and that's
Mm-hmm.
why we're having these conversations and doing this
Mm-hmm.
research, because it's like we didn't just fall apart out of nowhere. Like, we didn't just fall apart as a community and just all of a sudden we just decided, oh, you know what, let's just all do drugs and be willy-nilly. Like, that is not what happened. A lot of strategic things happen to our families to cause these huge kind of shifts and
Mm-hmm.
downward trajectories. But
Mm-hmm.
again, we don't have enough time, but we're going to definitely talk about this hopefully soon, because it's definitely worth a deep dive into what really happened. What are all the
Abs-
factors that
what
have
are
that
all the
happen?
factors? It's so much, and that's why we like to do these things as a series. Like, this is just
Right.
part one, because there's so many things that we want to cover, but we want to give you guys your time, and we only go an hour, and we're a little bit over right now, but we're trying to wrap it up right now. But we definitely appreciate everybody who was in the chat. Definitely, please give us a thumbs up, and
Absolutely.
of course, this is our
Always love
last
you
dry
guys.
run. This is our last dry run, so please subscribe, because next week we're going full boat and we ready to bring it to the people. So we definitely appreciate everybody out there that's giving a shout out. Anybody you want to give a shout out to?
I want to give a shout out to my auntie for joining. Thank you. My mom, obviously, my brother, my sister-in-law, anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and Valerie, thank you so much for joining. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure who else is on. I just know who's in the chat. I can't tell if
Right.
you're just on but not chatting. But thank you,
Right.
anybody that's on here. Thank you. We definitely appreciate you. But we're gonna
Definitely
start
appreciate it.
marketing, this coming weekend, and getting
Mm-hmm.
pushing the show out so we can actually invite more people. So if y'all want to
Absolutely.
invite more people, you can start doing that
Please.
now, because we wanted it to
Now.
kind of
Now.
get our feet wet a little bit. This is the
Right.
last couple episodes.
Exactly, exactly. And I definitely want to give a shout out to my uncle Pete. Pops is what we call him. Phil Williams,
Okay.
Claude Barnes. That's one of my mentors from A&T Aggie Pride. He gave
Oh,
a shout out to the
awesome.
movie Walls That Bleed, which he was a
Yes.
student. In that film, which we will definitely get to the Walls That Bleed picture. And of course Aisha.
Of
My girl.
course. Thank you for
Appreciate you
coming.
being here,
Of
baby.
course.
And so we definitely want to give that out. But sort of in closing, we just want to kind of reiterate this media literacy, and sort of, what it is, that we really want to kind of take from this, like teach, like this is where right now teaching them well media literacy as a survival tool for the marginalized youth, so
That's
people
right. This
out
is a
there that
great
have
article, you all.
children.
Please.
Yeah, it is a
Yeah.
great article. If you have kids out there, if you have grandkids or anybody, just start thinking about it. Like Amber had just mentioned earlier, my son, he listens to hip hop, but then after
Mm-hmm.
we listen to a song, I'm like, what did he talk about? Okay, let's
Right.
rewind it, and then let's play it
Mm-hmm.
again, and I need you to tell me what they're talking about, so then we can differentiate, because I don't want you to start thinking that you're gonna go out here and be doing this. Not as my child.
Right. That's right.
Mm-mm,
That's right.
mm-mm.
And I think, like, one of the things that even, I have to pull myself in, because it's easy, even though we're Black, even though, I live in a majority Black community. Most people I know are Black. Obviously, I have a mixture of friends, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we kind of feed into these own messages. Sometimes we
Yes.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
perpetuate some of the thinking that the
Yes.
status quo has kind of put
Yep.
on us, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, even though there is, to me, we still have a violence issue in certain cities. Like DC has just, to me, been just
It's been
violent
so
after, I
bad.
mean, we've had so much violence in the
So
last, I'd
much.
say, like 6 months. It's been really exhausting. I mean,
It's been crazy.
literally somebody was murdered 3 doors down, just in the street, in April. So it's like, it's I don't want to say it's getting worse, but it's still present, and we're never going to fully get rid of violence. As long as people are alive, violence is never going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really crucial when you're thinking about how the media frames these conversations and frames these communities and frames Black men, Black women. How are we feeding into our own stereotypes? How are we kind of denigrating our own people by believing some of these ideas and tropes, that we get fed.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, do we have work? This is one thing that we're going to talk about. We have work to do. No one's
We got
saying
work
we
to do.
don't.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a matter of kind of saying, look, I know that my dad is not like this. I know that I'm not like this. I know
Mm-hmm.
that the people I'm close to are not like this portrayal in the media. So we have to kind of stop feeding into that kind of narrative. Because I think it's once you kind of are aware of what the media is feeding you, sometimes you have to kind of keep re-educating yourself so you don't fall victim into those traps that the media kind of puts on us.
Yeah, consistently putting on us. And of
Yeah,
course, what we always like to do is make sure that we give y'all a few pieces of media reference to go off of. Typically, we usually do this at the beginning of the show, but
that's right.
Amber was like, "Mm, we going right to it." She's
Let's
like, "No,"
go.
she's
Let's
like, "We
go.
got to get right into it." So of course, there's these five pieces of film. All of them are actually out there for you to see. If you have Netflix or even YouTube, Outfoxed. That is actually an older documentary from 2005 about how Fox News came to power. Right now, you can go on to YouTube right now and watch it for free. It's about an hour and a half documentary, but you will really see how Fox News changed the game of media and media perception. That's
That's
definitely
right.
one thing that you need to check out. Social Dilemma is another one. That's one that just came out not that long ago,
Mhm.
about how these algorithms are sort of manipulating people into
Right.
making these choices. And of
Mhm.
course, the one that you said you watched twice, which was the
The
Great
great
Hack, right?
hack. I want everybody to get off when you're done. Go to your
Mm-hmm.
Netflix and watch The Great Hack, and actually watch the. You can really because Social Dilemma, The Great
Mm-hmm.
Hack, Crack, and
Kill the
Don't Kill the
Messenger.
Messenger or Kill the
Mm-hmm.
Messenger are all
Mm-hmm.
on Netflix. But The
Yes.
Great Hack actually it's like when you watch that because it really
Mm-hmm.
talks about how one private company was able to manipulate elections globally just
Mm-hmm.
by pouring propaganda into selected communities that were on the fringes of voting for either the right or the left. So all
Mm-hmm.
they did was pump them full of misinformation or
Mm-hmm.
skewed
Mm-hmm.
information to make sure that their candidate who hired them was
Yes.
elected. And you'll see
Mm-hmm.
who was in there. I don't want to give too much away. Watch the Great Hack and you'll see who benefited in 2016
Mm-hmm.
because of this
Mm-hmm.
particular company and because of this tactic of making sure that that fringe group was accounted for to make sure that those votes are
Mm-hmm.
counted because the 2016 election I think was like a matter of like 50,000 votes that could have
Yeah.
swung it. I mean, it
Swung
was
one
so
way or the other. It was
close.
so close. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so close. And they had a big part, that particular company in the Great Hack had a big part of why we had 45.
45. Yeah, we do not mention his name on
The
the show.
nameless.
Name the Voldemort. Like how it
Baltimore.
was
Yeah,
on
exactly.
the one who does not get
Exactly.
mentioned.
That's right.
So yeah, all these movies are definitely great. So once again, these are movies that we watch and research and do the research on the background of these movies to even make sure that they're factual because we don't want to give you guys referrals to movies that we don't think are going to be factual because of course we're trying to practice media literacy as well.
That's right. That's
You know.
right. And we try. We're trying. That means doesn't mean we get it right. But we're trying. We're trying to make sure we give you factual information here, backed
Correct.
by
Correct.
reputable sites
Correct.
and
And
sources.
then
Yeah.
going on to the next show. So we're gonna go a little light next week. Okay, we've been
Yes.
hitting y'all with them ones and twos, the
Mm-hmm.
past couple of episodes. So next week, of course, it's Black History Month. And that's when we're gonna do our full launch. But then also it's the Super Bowl, and I know Amber, you're a fan of football, and who's your
I
team?
was. I haven't been lately, but yes.
Okay. Well, I know whenever I tried to check you on sports, like you was like,
Mm-hmm.
boy, I know who that is. I was like,
Oh, I
excuse
know
me.
stuff, but I don't really support it like that, like I used to. So this will be my
Oh,
brother's show. My brother is like the sports person. He is the sports
okay,
human being.
okay, okay, okay. That's what's up. That's what's up. Well,
Yeah.
but next week we're gonna look at some, some sports movies. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And sort of some black, sports movies, and sort of talk about the Super Bowl a little bit. I don't know. Do you know who's playing in the Super Bowl? You know who's playing, right?
I have no idea.
You have no idea. The
Is
Tampa
the
Bay
Bills? Who
Buccaneers
is it?
and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Kansas City Chiefs.
Okay.
It's
So
gonna
we've
be good.
got the Patriots man. He's
Yep.
he's
Tom
he's
Brady.
back.
Yep. Tom Brady for a
This
tenth, for a tenth, a
he
tenth
will
time he's
never
going to the Super Bowl.
he's literally a testament to what taking care of your body and eating right does. Because what is he, 43? 42?
Uh, 43. He's 43 years old. Yep.
Yeah, like, and he looks great. I mean, he looks better than a lot of the young guys. So yeah, I mean, this will be interesting.
It's gonna be interesting. So that's what we're
Yeah.
gonna go. There, and then of course Uncle P goes in there and throws some old cowboy suck stuff in the chat. I don't understand what that means. That that's foreign to me. But once again, folks, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.
Any other shout outs we got to give, or I think that was good, right?
I thought, yeah, again, I'm always appreciate you all. So again, if you want to start sharing the show, you can actually like share our actual through a
Yes.
cultured lens to people. Just share that
Yes.
so people can
Mm-hmm.
start. And then also you can hit I think it's the notification bell when we're
Yep.
going live. So I don't have
Mm-hmm.
to always text everybody and email y'all know when we're going live. You'll get the notification of that.
Exactly.
So yeah,
Exactly. So again, thank y'all very much for rocking with us. We do appreciate it. And
yeah,
peace,
Raider
love,
Nation, Raider
Raider
Nation.
Nation. they, they ain't even in Oakland no more.
I know, but still, it's Raider Nation all day.
All right, that's what's up. All right, folks. Peace.
Okay, thanks y'all. Love y'all.